Hi, everybody. My name is Maria Asif, and I'm one of the coordinators of our group. And my apologies, I'm almost losing my voice, so I hope you don't mind. Excuse me. It's a pleasure to welcome Jen today, and I know that Rebecca and I were very fortunate to have, I would say, comparable conversation at the Naylor workshop. We were having dinner, enjoying our time, and the conversation started. And Jen shared with us amazing, thoughtful, and really perceptive comments about the way she thinks about scaffolding assignments, about her writing courses. And obviously, we know Jen years back from the Naylor workshop as well and the 4Cs. So when we started this conversation, we were like, we definitely need to have Jen come to our group, to the WAW group, and share her expertise and her experience. And we thought that our colleagues in the group will enjoy listening to what we had a glimpse of actually at the Naylor workshop dinner. So thank you again, Jen, for accepting our invitation and for your willingness to share, as I said, the wealth of experience you have in the field. For people who are not familiar with Jen's work, so I'm going to read actually a short bio from the website. I guess it's the safest way to do it.
You mean
But I also,
which one?
but I would also invite Jen, please, if I forget anything, please feel free to share an updated version of that bio. Dr. Jenn Fishman is an associate professor of English and the co-director of the Writing Center at Marquette University. She is the author of tens of articles, book chapters, and she's also the author of two books. The first one, The Naylor Report on Undergraduate Research in Writing, and that was in 2020. And then Telling Stories Perspective on Longitudinal Research in Writing Studies, and that's 2023. I also know that, again, from the years that I've known Jen as part of the Naylor workshop, that she's very passionate about undergraduate research, undergraduate writing, and she's somebody who is really committed to undergraduate students and always trying to find innovative ways to think about writing and pedagogy and writing studies and of course rhetoric. So again, it's an honor to have Jen, and I will let her finish actually the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me, for turning up here online. Yeah, this is a lovely opportunity to talk about to talk from a course that I've developed over a good 6 or 7 years, and that, I don't know, I'm a mid-career academic, so I think at this stage my courses reflect where I've been and where my head is and things I've learned from teaching. So I'm going to kind of I don't know, toggle around all those things. I think, though I tried to make these very tidy slides, it's mostly a ruse to hide the kind of many threads and deliberate messiness of how it occurs to me to talk about the course. By way of introduction, I'll say that for all the things that I focus on, which include, as Maria was saying, undergraduate research, absolutely, really from the jump, even as a graduate student. I do these longitudinal studies of writing that has a lot of overlap for me. I've also been involved in trying to hatch a notion of community listening, and I haven't really spent a long time actually writing about or really researching writing about writing, though certainly I'm a reader of it. I think about it. I teach with Rebecca Nowacek, so I have that as a kind of luxury of continuous interaction. I am not able to screen share, so maybe we could work on that. So this, one of the things I really appreciate about getting ready to talk with all of you is I really did some thinking about how my work is engaged with writing about writing and where I'm coming from. And so, aha, here we go. I am going to be able to share my screen momentarily. And I'm just going to make sure I'm not sharing the wrong screen because that would be embarrassing. Let's try this. Yeah, that works. So I am going to try to talk for like about 30 minutes. Maybe I'm going to try to talk a little less, so that we can really have a conversation about the things that stand out to all of you about this assignment sequence. And I'll just plant a couple of seeds so you can ignore them. Um, I know that at Marquette, I teach in this kind of like boutique teaching situation where this advanced composition course that I'm going to talk from um, enrolls at 20. And I have a 2-2 teaching load with writing administration. And so I haven't had to figure out how to teach this with a greater number of students in the room or with a greater number of courses under my care and responsibility. So I'm really interested in what does seem and what doesn't seem like it would fly in whatever teaching situations you all are in. And I think I've I haven't done the most rigorous assessment or other research into this course and its impact on students. And so I'm really open to talking about what that could look like and how it might work. So let's see if I can advance some slides. So here's me, and here's like a really quick visual introduction to where I've been and what I think about. I think we've covered most of these things. The cat may or may not actually show up on screen. Um, but certainly my experience as a researcher informs, and you'll see some really direct ways that it informs how I approach teaching this class, especially the Stanford Study of Writing and Vernon Writes. And I think my interest in undergraduate research is just all over this thing. And maybe some of the work that I do in first year writing and in the Writing Center. So here's the assignment sequence, and I'm going to talk semi-substantially about each unit. So you'll see this slide again, but it's a 3-unit course. And I tell the students it's 2 shorts and a long. So a 4-week unit that asks students to do some self-study, a 4-week unit that asks them to kind of resituate their sense of themselves in some particular ways, and then an 8-week unit in which they self-design and self-assign an inquiry-based project. And I'll talk about what that really means. The first 2 units are me trying to lead them up to the 3rd unit and make them really capacitated to do highly scaffolded, but still performatively independent work. And I really want that to be part of their sense of the experience. What are the course materials for this thing? I assign chapters of Ball and Lowy's Bad Ideas About Writing. And I kind of fiddle around with which ones I assign and when and how I ask them to read the book. I don't know if any of you teach anything from it. Students sometimes don't get right away the gambit of the book, which is each of the chapter titles states a really terrible idea about writing and then counters it. But if you just see all those titles in a row and you're not in the headspace of the book, then you might, as my students thought for about a week and a half this year, think that the book is going to actually affirm a whole series of really terrible ideas about writing. That's fun and surprising. I teach a collection of writing from the Stanford study that focuses on 9/11. So that's the reader aftermaths. And if somebody asks me or reminds me, I can drop a link into the chat, but not while I'm in this screen sharing mode. We spent a lot of time with students reading each other's writing and also their own writing. And so those are the course materials. And here's the workflow. One of the things I try to tell them is this course will have the most regular workflow you've ever experienced in your whole lives. I'm usually partially right. We meet 2 days a week. They have reading in between those meeting days, and there is substantial writing due at the end of the week. And so I try to really play up the rhythm as regular so that a lot of surprising things can happen inside each of those very regular kinds of activities. Every semester I've taught this course, I have a student who says to me that they couldn't figure out how the course worked. It seemed disorganized to them. Of course, these are like, the anonymous evaluations. And so I never get to really follow up, but I think that they respond to the unpredictable things that happen on any given Tuesday or Thursday, or the ways in which they're reading each other's work, because the thing is so organized from one point of view. So there is something about my approach that reads as profoundly disorienting. Sometimes, I get a lot of positive feedback. This course was unlike others, and here's why I liked it. But I think that the way that I ask students to play and be playful does really, freak out at some outliers, and throws them for other kinds of loops. But here is the organization of the course in a nutshell. And if I ever veer from this, it's because I drop something, but I never switch something out or vary from this. And that's part of the gambit. So how is anything I'm doing writing about writing approach for real? When I sat down to really think about this, I drew on Reimagining the Nature of FYC, which feels kind of like a classic to me, by Doug Downs and Elizabeth Wardle. And I also drew on axiology and transfer in writing about writing, to try to think about what are my categories and how might I fit myself in. And I decided, and we'll see what you all think of this, that I'm going to cast my pedagogical approach to writing about writing as rhetorical. So what does that mean? To me, whenever I think about rhetoric, I think about it as a teaching tradition. And I draw on some particular scholarship to do that, including Jerzy Axer and Jeff Walker, and some pieces that came out of the Alliance of Rhetoric Societies meeting in 2003, and have some publication dates that I've dashed up on the slide for you. It's about capacitating students for participation. Often that gets translated into something only civic, but I really think about what does it mean to ask our students to participate as communicators in all of the situations that constitute their lives. Every time I use the word situated, I'm trying to like flash the literacy studies sign behind my head, because I think literacy studies is really important to me and how I think about doing the things I do. And that includes my kind of ongoing wrangles with new literacy studies, which became new literacies studies in the plural, and also the multiliteracies idea first articulated by the New London group. So it's pretty quick and dirty. But sometimes I feel like both rhetoric and literacy studies kind of drop out of some of the ways that we talk about comp, and composition, and that kind of move around in writing studies. And so I wanted to make them really present in this talk because they're very present to me. Okay, so here's my reckoning with writing about writing. What do I think I'm doing? I think I'm providing resources and opportunities for students to have experiences in and through my class that can help them make observations and substantiate claims about themselves as writers or people who write and who are learning how to learn about writing, especially beyond my or any classroom. So sure, I hope this has all kinds of academic benefits for them, but that's not really my primary in an advanced composition classroom. So bringing in the axes, right? What do I hope is happening? I hope that students are learning to negotiate commitments to self-expression and successful communication with others. So to place themselves in individual acts on that sociological axis, as I understand it. I hope I'm helping students to attend to the ways that power dynamics and negotiations of them are part of writing in all contexts, academic and otherwise, whether they're experiencing privilege or some of the difficulties that come with that. And I also hope that I'm helping students recognize or seek and effectively meet opportunities to engage with writing in other contexts outside of my classroom. So that might mean asking questions, that might mean borrowing moves from themselves and from others. So that's the transfer access. How do I know? Well, we'll talk about what I take as indicators as we move through this. So here's the assignment sequence again, the 3 parts: self-study, and kind of resituating what they think they've learned about themselves, and then projecting or working on the project. And then this is advanced comp. It bears a 3,000 out of 4,000 kind of scale for us. And I get first year students, sometimes first semester first years who've taken all their AP credits and so on, and then I get fifth year seniors. So everybody, it tends to be in the room. Okay, so unit 1, the heart of the first unit is compiling a personal archive or portfolio. And I kind of play with those two terms. I don't know which one I like more. And this semester, and I'm always changing what I ask them to put in, this is the most reduced table of contents for students. 2 examples that you think show the breadth and variety of your writing. 3 to 5 examples that represent you as a student, 3 to 5 examples that represent you as something else, like go ahead and fill in that blank. 3 to 5 examples of writing you're proud of, and an example that students think rounds out their portfolio from their point of view. And I scaled this thing way back because I had a lot of sophomores. They don't have as much writing as when I have mostly juniors and seniors in the room. And because it had become a little unwieldy, this assignment is based on an archive, I guess, assignment that I developed for Vernon Wright's, the retrospective longitudinal study of writing that I conducted a few years ago at Vernon College, which is a pseudonym for a small liberal arts college in the Midwest. You can see it's much more extensive because I was working at that time with seniors, and I was asking them to look back at all 4 years of college in the very writing intensive environment of a private residential small liberal arts college. That list represents my trying to wrangle the spirit of the Stanford study, which I was a researcher on, and where we asked students to just give us any and all writing that they could possibly fathom sharing with us. So we had a wild amount of writing that we've never really, from my point of view, wrangled effectively. And it's available. If you want to research it, you can, and you can ask me about that. But I felt a lot of kind of guilt and frustration, guilt at students really taking time and being serious about sharing their writing, and frustration that I didn't know how to match the ask with the things I wanted to do. And so I've been playing with that, and my experience working on Vernon Wright's, which I'm just starting to write and publish about, got me thinking about how I could teach it. So here's how I teach it, and what are some of the kinds of things that we do to make it a self-study besides compiling. You can read some of those, but I do ask them to reflect on the process of making it, and rereading work. So depending on how far back any student goes, reading their own stuff to make selections is meaningful and surprising. I ask them to contextualize that writing based on conversations that they share with others, based on things that they chose not to share. And we talk a lot about how I'm going to be the reader of it. So there's some stuff that they definitely write and we'll talk about writing, but opt not to share, especially personal things. I have them do some quantitative and qualitative analyses of length, of sentence length, of things that they can do easy observations of, as much to get students thinking about what is a meaningful way to look at their writing as to draw really meaningful conclusions. So some of the quantitative stuff is really hard to do meaningfully on the fly, but it gets them thinking about some ways to make sense of writing that maybe they've not done before. All of where we're headed is I want them to be able to identify areas for growth and development supported by related rationales. And some of those stay pretty close to their self-study and their analyses of their own writing. And some of them, it's like mood music, right? And looking this closely at what's in their archives or portfolios creates a context for how we're going to talk about what their projects become. And it might move kind of far away from it if we are talking about a rigorous movement from data analysis to a discussion of findings. But that kind of works for where we head in this class. So I'm going to keep kind of moving through these so we can always come back to them. In the second unit, the second 4 weeks, well, I start conferencing with students to talk about their portfolios. What are we doing in class? This is where I bring in the Stanford study of writing materials. I word searched through, I should say, those, I don't know, 10,000 individual pieces of writing, looking for anything that contains the phrase September 11 or 9/11. And I got about 230 individual pieces of writing, some of which were about 9/11, some of which simply reference it in passing. And working with an undergraduate researcher, we made this reader that we call Aftermaths. And I have students read some sections of it. And we talk about, like, how are we emplaced in time? Um, a lot's been going on. I started doing this version of the course during COVID. So we talk about, what does it mean to be doing our everyday lives and to be living through something that is historic? And we look at the writers who are from the class of 2005 at Stanford as our counterparts. And so try to imagine some things in relation to their writing and look anew at things in relation to our writing. How do we see evidence of what's going on in history, in local history, national history, global history, in the kinds of things that they assembled for their portfolios? We can kind of play around with those questions. And then we talk about editing. And it totally happened on that by accident about 3 years into teaching this version of the course, because I was kind of casting around for a way to do more with reading in my class without like having to assign a lot of really heavy readings and become like my lit colleagues and center reading. I do a lot of editing, so that's in my head. And so I invite them either to do things with the Stanford writing or to edit their own collections. And I keep playing with that, and what I want to ask people to do, kind of based on how I read each new group of students. So some of the things that we do in relation to this, we also play with research, and we do blitz research. One day I say, okay, we're going to take the next 25 minutes, and this group is researching the music the class of 2005 might have grown up listening to, and this group is researching fashion and pop culture and things that feel pretty within reach. And we, on the one hand, we see who knows how to use Google and other easily available things in which ways. And we talk about how they know what to do, and everyone kind of picks up a few cool things from each other. But then we have a context for discussing, why would we want to do more research about anything that's come up? What would make us want to know more and want to know more in a different way? And I'm trying to create a context for requiring inquiry of different kinds in their projects. And I'm also trying to find out, okay, what does each group know about not just database research, but how do you research how a meme came up? How do you research in government documents? How do you do all these different things that maybe are going to come up? And then as a kind of endpoint, as they're making their project pitches for their own research, sometimes we do some past and present thinking, like write letters to the class of 2045 to try to put everything into some perspective. What does it mean to be a college writer? What would you want to know if we could talk with the folks from the class of 2005? And different semesters, I kind of pick a mix from these things based on all kinds of things that are in my head, and that represent me trying to respond to the groups that I'm actually teaching. So then we're in Unit 3. What are these 8-week projects? Pray tell. I almost always teach this course in the fall, so I'm negotiating a week of Thanksgiving, either interrupting or helping us. All projects, no matter what they are, and they are very different from each other, they have to take up and respond in some way to Unit 1 self-study findings, sometimes in a pretty direct way, sometimes in a little bit of a loosey-goosey way. They have to include multiple lines of inquiry, and that might mean historic research. That might mean, how do I research the web platform that should host the personal portfolio I am making? So we really talk about the differences between trying to find out something and trying to tap into a research method that gets used by a group of people in particular ways. We go through developmental loops. So I'm trying to break them of the idea that all research is going to be front-end information gathering and then just writing it up. I do a song and dance that hits home maybe like 75% of the time that everyone needs to be writing a real genre, and have models and do a little genre analysis that goes along with that. There's a lot of time management as well as managing oneself as a writer involved in this. So we talk about a project calendar and matching how we work and what else is going on in one's life. And then we talk about making good use of available resources, including themselves and their people and one another in the course and campus resources. So what does that mess look like? Okay, here's what happens. Students write weekly project updates, and I respond to like every other one. I read them all. Sometimes I respond to the whole class. I am not writing back every single time to students, but I'm watching, and I can respond to somebody who has a pressing question or seems to have fallen by the wayside. They also are uploading weekly evidences, so there's accountability. Um, they have small groups, and part of what I'm trying to do is get them to talk to each other like people who have somebody to write with. So they problem solve for each other, and they do a lot of things before they ever see each other's writing. So I'm trying to build the intellectual community. I definitely am trying to connect them with other people on campus or sometimes in their lives who can help them with their work and take them seriously as writers and inquirers. Um, I'm watching to see who the strugglers are and what we can do about it. Um, I do a lot of, oh, hey, look at that. I spelled Taylor incorrectly. I tailor free writes and on-site reading and watching to try to get at what I see going on for the group. So I'm responding in that way. I definitely dedicate some class meeting time to writing on site. And I do conference 3 times with students during this semester, once before midterms as they're proposing projects, once after, and then I don't have a final, but I meet with everyone for exit interviews, which again, my workload and my class size afford me that ability. Um, so, okay, how is this, me trying to do my rhetorical approach to writing about writing? It's just a repeat of the previous slide. I'm definitely trying to get students to negotiate their commitments to self-expression and successful communication with others. And we're now really in that zone because students have a substantial draft material by this week, which is week 13. And some of them have really fallen in love with what they have decided to say. And they have these small groups and they're reading each other's stuff, and it does or doesn't land. And so they're negotiating with, like, am I going to compromise? And it feels pretty real at this juncture. How do they attend to the way power dynamics and negotiations of power are part of writing in any context? That varies from project to project. I think I really see it in some of the students who have professionally or publicly oriented projects. They're working on presenting themselves as internship, applicants or as job applicants for some of the seniors. And they're really attentive to being read based on who they are. And, what does it maybe look like to try to get them ready to ask questions, to borrow moves from each other and from themselves and move them into this context? And I can see some of that. And some of that I think is the stuff we never get to see, right? It comes up well after they've left our classes and they're doing all the things they do. So what do these students make? This is the last set of slides I'm going to show before we get to talk to each other. These are some example projects from previous semesters, shared with permission. This was, believe it or not, a passion project of the student who's gone on to dental school. And she thought it was going to be this neat and tidy project, email etiquette for successful online communication. She's a writing center tutor, or was. She's graduated now, and so she should have known better that every genre is unruly once you try to actually put it with a group of users. And she really, in spite of herself, because she wanted it to be very in a box, learned a lot about how hard it is to decide what successful communication is going to look like and how to write about it for peers. This student said to me as a sophomore, I want to write my memoir. I want to write my COVID memoir. And I just cringed inside because I was worried I was going to be invited to kind of read over the shoulder and that the student was going to like share journal entries with me and that might not go all the places I wanted it to go. And this young man had a phenomenally um, just layered sense of putting his experience into broader contexts of his own experience with depression, anxiety, and OCD, but also like what those things are and how young people deal with them, and also COVID. And he wound up really being able to toggle in and out of his own experience and some other perspectives on it in a way that I thought was really sophisticated, and was full of research-based information expressed in very personalized ways. Um, this is my favorite because it's so weird and wonderful. A student said to me, she's from Alaska. She said, "Hey, I wish I could have been a marine biologist. I'm really fascinated by walruses, and I want to do a project that includes a diorama like we used to make in the fifth grade." And, one of my just principles for this is I say, okay, tell me how it fits. My assignment parameters was full of inquiry. It included these creative outlets, some of which, like writing poetry, she felt she never got to do. She was a junior when she did this project. It included multimodalities. She wanted to do things with her hands because she missed doing that. And she read history, she read post-colonial theory. She really thought about what did it mean to try to represent things from particular perspectives. So even her diorama has this perspectival analysis to it. This thing went so many different places that I couldn't have predicted, but was really meaningful to the student and represented a great deal of just thoughtful research and writing and rewriting. Um, Here we go. This is the blurb for a novel in progress, a religious horror novel that also involves comedy and surrealism. You can see the range of topics in the bottom paragraph: demonology, suicide, bees, the apocalypse. Um, right? This was a little bit tongue in cheek. Maybe that stands out to you. Also, totally serious. These two students who are juniors who came to class to be able to work on this thing as co-authors. Okay. They're now writing this project as the first co-authored honors project that I think my university has ever seen. Um, Anxious Minds, Divergent Outcomes was a web-based project, and it was also interview-based. And the author did intergenerational interviews with women and her family who experience anxiety, and strung them all together and did a really marvelous amount of research about how to conduct these interviews and mediate them, about how to frame the information and toggle between the personal and the medical and scientific. And the following semester, she was an award recipient for multimodal writing. And so was this sophomore who wanted to think about breaking up with social media and took this kind of lovely approach. She also did some interviews with people and wanted to find a way to present that information that might be engaging to her peers. And she was also an award recipient the following semester. Um, so that is a kind of wild ride through my course in the semester. And I'm going to jump out of screen share, though I can go back in if we want to see more slides so that I can see all of you in the chat and find out what we should talk about.
Thank you so much, Jen. As you were talking, my mind was going to so many different directions, but
I promise.
honestly, the outcomes that you've shared seem to be wonderful. And I love seeing student voices, and I think colleagues who are in attendance feel the same way about the works that you've shared from students and the different actually pathways and directions that they took. So thank you so much for sharing. We're opening obviously the space for questions or comments or any requests from Jen.
I would like to say, Jen, again, thank you for this wonderful presentation and thank you for giving us such uh, an experiential approach to your curricula. This is so, I'm just so fascinated by the entirety of it. And I really have been gravitating toward that concept of capacitance as you've been using it throughout the piece. So I was wondering if you could talk more about that and how that term connects with your work in general, but because it seems to be significant throughout this presentation.
Yeah, that's a term that I get from rhetoric scholarship. We can all pick it up from wherever, right? But this idea of capacitating students, and it really comes from, I encountered it. I was in my last year of graduate school when that Alliance of Rhetoric Societies one time only meeting of really deliberately cross disciplinary rhetoric scholars came together in Evanston, Illinois, and we're really trying to figure out like what is this whole study of rhetoric, and the idea that rhetoric is a teaching tradition was so wild, and was obvious to some people, especially perhaps some of the folks coming to rhetoric from comp, and felt like maybe a discovery and a different kind of a set of risks to some of our colleagues coming from com. And capacitating, it can immediately go all into the ether, like all the good Latinate terms that we like to kick around. But to me, the things that stood out to me were the efforts to bring rhetoric down into, it starts with civic participation in some really Greco-Roman kinds of ways, but I thought, especially getting to know students through longitudinal research, which affords just getting to know them in ways that maybe advising does, or if you have some students who really work with you, but otherwise we don't see students for all 4 of their years and get all these pivots with them. And I thought, oh yeah, what does it mean to capacitate students? It's like to do all the things. And I'm really, as much as I want students to be successful in whatever that's going to mean to them in school, I am just not interested in that being the boundary for the work that I do, right? So much of our students' lives just happen outside of school, and are not about us. And we don't always take that very well, I think, in some of how we set parameters for our work, or can, right? If we have to assess our programs or things that we do, we have to be interested in some smaller pies. But I thought, okay, what does it mean to capacitate somebody to participate? And I think Linda Flower's community literacy work matters to me, and how I've figured out to think about that, and all that kind of community engaged stuff. I think we get to see it and maybe participate in some of it with students. And so it's agency, but agency with direction, or it's self-confidence or self-efficacy, but with a social element to it. Like, okay, so now we have these like spaces, these, I'm on semesters, so I think it's terms of semester spaces, and like, how do we make our classes like a sandbox for experimenting with that? And when I directed first year English, I thought a lot about how we can get first year comp to be involved in some of this. That's harder because if you share a curriculum with other instructors, right, everyone has to be able to wear it. Whereas I'm the only one who has to wear my advanced comp class, and everyone teaches advanced comp differently, and that seems to be okay for now, anyhow, on my campus. But giving students choices, they want to see their own writing, they want to see each other's writing, taking them seriously. I always have students who kind of freak out in the front half of this class. And one way or another, by the time I'm conferencing with them, I think I learned that most of the time people don't take them seriously in their lives. And what I am doing is taking them seriously and invoking them not just as writers, but as choice makers, right? They get to make all these choices. And so some of the scaffolding for this and some of the things I do, is me responding to how I understand, like, I can help them take themselves seriously, because there's a lot that you can't ask right off, depending on who your students are and where they've been, because it just doesn't make sense to them. Or I also have to prove that I'm not going to punish them for making choices, because they've really been put through the ringer, especially educationally. Marquette students are pretty well prepared educationally, which mostly means they've been through a lot of tough formal schooling. and they know enough about trying to be insiders that they know maybe somebody's inviting them to take a risk but doesn't mean it. So also a lot of those first weeks of my class are about me showing them that they can take a risk and that I'm going to give them points for doing the assignment, and how all of that works. So that all feeds into it for me. And I definitely pointed my walrus student, this is a comment to Joseph, something you put in the chat, to Kenna Ichigayek's work. Absolutely.
Well, I'm committed to try your class, Jen. I think I told you that when we talked back in September. I am committed to. And I think it would be really fun if a small group of us tried it and then kind of came back and to reflect on how it went. I can't say when the next time I'm going to teach advanced comp is, because I'm sort of like I'm just me, and I have to do all the upper level comp and all the upper level linguistics, and it's just me.
Yeah.
So I don't get to teach these classes as often as I would like to, but for sure, the next time I teach advanced comp, of course, I can't do it exactly like you, but
Nor should you. This thing reflects me and reflects how I understand Marquette and stuff like that.
But I could give it a shot. I will try. I think it'll be fun. I really like the thing that you're doing.
Thank you. If anyone wants to do it in the fall, I'll send you whatever you like. I'm happy to share materials, but I tend to only teach it in the fall, so we could really try to synchronize something.
I could volunteer, and hey, maybe our students could even do some kind of little buddy thing.
Yeah. Linda.
Hi, I have a question. This is really very interesting to me. As some background, I am the writing course curriculum coordinator and have been for a long time at a CUNY community college, and I don't think we really do a lot of advanced composition at that level, but I am thinking very much of how some of this could be adapted. And I guess a question that I do have is how you've gotten your students to go from units 1 and 2 to unit 3. I guess I don't really see that as clearly for myself, especially unit 2. Now, I will say for unit 1, my students are not going to have many examples of writing that they are proud of or not so proud of. They are not going to have many examples of their writing. We can push it along to further levels and look at writing in the major, but the idea of how you've gotten them to go from units 1 and 2 to unit 3 would be of interest to me. So if you wouldn't mind speaking
Not a bit. I should say that part of how my students who think they don't have very much writing to share do have writing. We do a whole thing about what counts as writing one day in class, and we get to making memes and videos, and some of them are commenters on social media, and they really write some extensive stuff, or they write fan fiction. Again, there's you set boundaries because you don't want to see everything that they might have been doing. And nor should they show us everything that they do. That's not our business. But I really emphasize we are not just talking about academic writing. And we're not just talking about alphanumeric linear writing. And that often opens things up. Sometimes instead of proud, show your different voices can be a good cue. People who write songs, write code, write in other languages, translate for families, all that stuff is on the table. And so, you can sort of maybe bulk it out there. The second unit, well, okay, I'm going to back up. I'm going to say all these little things that I'm doing all the time, which I think is really hard to see. So I'm really glad you asked this question. I'm always trying to seed things that I'm going to ask them to do or pay attention to while we're doing projects. So because I want their projects to be seriously multimodal and in genre that are going to be meaningful to them, I spend all this time writing is all these things, and here are all the different genre we can embrace, so that that's present in the room and is an available choice. And then I make sure that we do some cycles of the blitz research, and then talking about why we'd ever do more research. And so I'm showing how you get started using everyday resources, and then how you'd pivot. And I'm naming some of the directions that you could take research. Even if we're not doing it, I'm naming those things in unit 2 I'm trying to bring them into the room so then students can do them in Unit 3. Unit 2 kind of, I mean, really, it often mostly sucks, at least some percentage, because it's a bridge. And depending on who's in the room, and sophomores or seniors and English majors or non-majors, I'm really manipulating that unit just to get us from, okay, we've made an archive, to, okay, now we're going to propose projects. And so sometimes we need more reading and writing, and sometimes we need more research. And it's really a little bit of a crapshoot. I think it's a messy unit, which is why I say I think it sucks. I don't think it's as tidy as the other two. I think I kind of get away with it because the students are so intent on pitching their projects, which comes at the end of it. So it doesn't have to have the unity of that first unit, which I think really has to be strong, at least in my teaching context, so they believe me. Because, and this goes to Joseph's question, when the students come into the course, what do they think they're getting into? They really have no idea. They think they're gonna, it's a writing intensive course. It fills a gen ed upper division writing requirement. It's required of the English majors who have the writing concentration. They think they're going to write essays in an iterative 2 weeks in an essay and revise it kind of death march kind of way. And I write the syllabus as a letter to them or a memo, kind of play around with the genre. So I directly address them, and I move in and out of very academic and less academic registers because I'm modeling the appropriate range of discourse in the class. And then the first reading assignment that we do is on Perusal, which is a widget that some of you might know that kind of turns a PDF into a collaborative commenting space, so that they can see comments that they're making in the margins of documents that I upload. And I have them read and annotate the syllabus. So I hand out a two-pager, single sheet, both sides. Wow, that was cat jumping onto the table. Please excuse me. I hand out this really simple document on the first day, and then I ask them to read the whole thing before they show up for day 2. And it lays out grading, and I have an anti-racist language statement, and I have some details about the whole course. And so we talk about how they have no idea what's happening and how this does not resemble other courses that they've been in. And I ask them to annotate things that are similar and things that are different. So I'm trying to manage expectations the whole time. I would say some of the things that I don't do, because I have a higher tolerance for chaos than for structure, but maybe if you don't feel the same way, could be really smart things to do. I kind of let them move in ways that make sense to them through their project calendars for those 8 weeks. And I put on the calendar some days that you have to bring writing to share with your small group. So I make a few benchmarks. I think in other situations, especially with earlier college writers, I can imagine creating more guardrails and scaffolding and saying, okay, in these projects, everyone has to do some genre analysis. How do examples of the genre that you're going to write really work? Let's make some time for a first round of research, and then several weeks later, let's make some time for a second round of research and showing some of that evidence in more formalized ways, the equivalent of an annotated bibliography. And I think there are some ways that things could be more synchronized and regularized in that project zone that I tend not to do, but I think I might do if I had earlier writers, if I had a bigger course size, or if I had less time to do individuated instruction, which so far I do, but my course load's going to increase. So maybe I'm going to change a few things. We'll see what happens.
Thank you so much, Jen. Can I ask a quick question? Actually, a couple of questions.
Mhm.
The first one is about intrinsic motivation, because I think in these kinds of classes that are, if I may call them writing focused, writing intensive, as you said, with with a lot of guidance, but still I feel that it's loosely structured in a way that allows students to navigate it in a way that they're comfortable with. I'm wondering how do you perceive their and how do you foster their inner motivation about the course and keeping up with the work, because it's a lot of work, and shifting genres, shifting ways of writing, and so on and so forth. And my second question is about what you said when you talked about how those first weeks are critical in making them understand that you take them seriously. And I'm wondering, what are the intentional moves that you make so that they know that you're taking them seriously, and the impact that this has on them and their work and their progress and so on and so forth.
Yep. And then I'm also going to answer Samuel's question about collaborative stuff. With regard to motivation, I've seen this in my own research, starting with the Stanford study, which went on between 2001 and 2006. And then again in Kenyon, or Vernon writes, "Ooh," pretend like you didn't hear that. And I think a lot of you probably see it in your classes. When students have a lot of choices, oftentimes they choose their way into something that they're motivated to do at least a little bit more than if we chose it entirely for them. So, that helps students with motivation. I had a student who was very displeased with the fact that as an engineer, he has to take this gen ed upper division writing requirement, and he's a charmer. We like each other now, but he wrote some pretty stroppy pieces of writing about, like, why do I have to be here, and why does Marquette make me have to take this class? He sees himself as an autodidact, and all instruction is kind of terrible, and he doesn't really think that, it turns out. But by the time he figured out that he could do research and writing for this video about the origin of chess that he is, going to make one day, he started to really listen to the rest of the class and to participate. And he thinks a lot of really interesting things. And now he takes his peers a little bit seriously. And so, there's some magic to just getting out of students' way, or being in their way, in kind of the right balance. For students who are very extrinsically motivated, the regularity of due dates and deadlines, really does it. And I grade, if you are on time and complete, you get all the points. And so that also helps students deal with, I think, more intrinsic motivation, because that kind of ungrading really helps them focus on what they're trying to make instead of making things for the grade. And that really, I think I've been doing that really explicitly since COVID, and that really has a lot of magic. In the first part of the class, some of the things that I do to show that I'm taking them seriously, the reason I write my syllabus as a letter is so I'm writing directly to them. And if they don't point it out, then I do. Like, hey, look, from the jump, I made this whole class and I am addressing you. The back page of the syllabus is tips from previous students about how to be successful in the class. So they see some of those things coming from their peers. They include things like go to office hours and, some stuff that, I definitely was grateful that people wrote and picked very deliberately to put on that back page. But I always talk about a couple of things that I've changed since the last time I taught it. So I'm trying to show how I listen to what they say. And then I am never more on top of grading than I am in the first 3 weeks of this class, so that they see that I'm doing what I said I would do, both for giving all the credit and for seeing when you're not doing the work, and I write back to them, and I really set up a kind of communication pattern that, I can't actually maintain the amount of hyper feedback I give them. I couldn't do that all semester long. But once we're set up and we have a relationship, then we can go for different stretches of time, and we've got some basis for trust and work. So I definitely do that. Sometimes students do that Unit 2 project and the editorial work together. The only students who've worked together for their final project are these two who write together. Because students just don't feel like they can manage. Our students are so overprogrammed. They're taking 5 and 6 classes, which I believe is too many. They're working a lot. They volunteer and do all these other things. So they don't have a lot of time, but to balance that solo individualistic dynamic, oftentimes the working groups really become social support systems for them. And they're really in each other's projects and giving feedback. And I hear them giving feedback that I'm delighted they're giving because I might have given it too, but they really take it from each other. And so I think that's where the collaborative element comes in. And I think that works because I have them working with each other for so much time before they ever share writing. So they're really involved in each other's projects and they build their own trust. We do a little free writing at the beginning of every class, and I have them kind of swapping or sharing that in different ways from the get-go. So I'm also really trying deliberately to build a class that feels like an intellectual community. And I say a lot, we're going to get to know each other as writers. And maybe we're going to get to know each other more, but we're in this room because it's writing class and we're doing writing. So we are going to get to know each other as writers. And so that also kind of lets students decide how much of the rest of them they're going to bring. And I think that choice often invites students to bring quite a bit of themselves. And that also then becomes, I think, part of the motivation is they can be a part of themselves that they're not in their major or elsewhere in college or however that's working.
I think it's my turn next. So how do you get your students to conference with you?
There are a couple of strategies that I employ. One is points. So those 3 conferences are worth as much as a weekly writing assignment. They are big points. So they are easy points because you just show up. In the first conference where they're talking about projects, I kind of, I try to prove utility, right? We problem solve. I like the invention stage. So sometimes people come in thinking they have nothing and walk out with a project, and that makes the next conferences a little bit more worthwhile seeming. I do in person in a convenient location, the Writing Center, which is in the library on my campus, and I also do online. And so that, I'm really happy to be online with students, and that makes it possible for the commuters and for students who just have challenging schedules. I will hop online always during an office hour so I can be on campus and somebody can schedule an online meeting, and that makes a big difference. And yes, I would be willing to share syllabus, though, like I feel like they're like really dissatisfying documents, right? Because there's just only so much that a syllabus actually says. And so you'll see what it does and doesn't actually offer you about all the things that we've been talking to each other about tonight.
I think I have more follow-ups because this is a big challenge for me to get students to meet with me.
Mm-hmm.
More so now than ever before, because they used to just do it, but now it's like I can't get them to. So you don't have them meet you in your office, you meet them somewhere else.
My office
Or
is
is
at the
it-
writing center. So
okay.
it's a twofer.
Okay. And then how about do you cancel class on those days and do it during class time, or is it in addition to class time?
It depends. Marquette only gives us half a week for Thanksgiving, and I give us a week. And so I'm pretty, depending on if I'm going to academic conferences, like I'm very deliberate and careful about just canceling class. So sometimes I feel like I can't cancel class meetings for conferences because I'm canceling for these other reasons. So my balance in terms of how much can I stand as a person needing to plan things is I will be pretty deliberate with days when we're just going to write on site. And, sometimes that just means I don't have to plan a class, and that helps me do the conferencing. And sometimes if I do the write on sites, sometimes I can catch the people who didn't manage to sign up for a conference or didn't manage to attend the conference they signed up for, because if they're in class, we can go in the hall and quickly conference. And so if the point is getting to have a conversation about the work, that helps me make it happen. And if the point is sometimes wooing somebody to see that the conference isn't going to be scary or a waste of time or whatever somebody thinks it is, sometimes that in-class exchange is enough to get the conference scheduled. But it's definitely, I've decided I'm going to make that effort, and that is feasible to me, whereas I've cut out other things where the effort doesn't feel like it's the right return on investment of my time and energy.
I think I have one more follow-up because I've seen people do like a paper, and I've done this before. Here's a paper and here's all these times, and then you sign your name next to the time you want. Do you ever do it like that, or do you just do individual appointments whenever happens to be convenient?
I have a standing Google Doc where I list my office hours, and my regular office hours are, modest and feasible. And my available office hours during week conference are much greater. And I have the link in our learning management deal, and I just show them, and I have a little illustration of how you sign up in a Google Doc using comments. And so it's public. I can bring that up in class. They can always see it. It is not a piece of paper, but it's also not Calendly and some of these apps where students are in a calendar signing up for stuff, because I can't handle that. For some reason, that's like over some line. But I think people who use those kinds of digital calendars with their students will maybe find this even easier than my Google Doc solution or the piece of paper.
I am satisfied. I'll let you know if my students make any appointments with me. I'm still trying.
I have another good 10 minutes. I know we're a little over time, or if now it's time to stop, then I'm also happy to stop.
If you don't mind, can you do Joseph's last question?
Oh yeah, I didn't see it. Sorry. Do I ever run into students who don't have much previous writing or interest? They're often, yes, I do. Usually my invitation to think really big. Do you make a lot of memes? Do you write code? What languages do you have? Usually that gets a pretty full archive or portfolio or whatever I'm calling it. And I invite them to make different categories, right? Sometimes that's still a push, and because my students often come from schools where all their high school writing was on a school issued laptop or in a school issued Google What's It account. So they don't have access to it. Or somebody's got a machine that blew up, and so they lost all of their prior writing. And so I guess sometimes I've had to be creative. Like once I got a lot of videos that a student made because they were a digital media major. So they had a lot of recent school assignment videos. Once I had to invite a student to describe the writing that she had done. She really didn't have that much writing. Sometimes I've invited students, they do a lot of journaling, and most of it they don't want to share with me, but it's really, really important to them. So, I'll invite them to share a little bit so that I might be able to learn their tone of voice and just see some of their prose. But I'll have them talk about, like, sum up these 10 years of journals that you have and why you wrote in them, and to kind of make some sort of secondary layer between me and their writing, because they don't have it. But I guess, if somebody really had a greater dearth, like, okay, how are you a communicator? How else can you represent to me the ways in which you have been moving through the world and communicating with yourself and others? Like including, sometimes we get folks from northern Wisconsin, so they do a lot of communication with the more than human animals, as Robin Wall Kimura would say, on their family farm. So, okay, like in part, I think the challenge of the portfolio is like, how far can we go with them? So they do the spirit of the thing, to see what space we could make so that they'll do a writing project that really pushes them as communicators. And that to me, like the feedback from that portfolio really matters, because they have to say how their project is going to push or grow them as writers. And I always get someone who says, well, I've written a lot of essays and I really like that genre. And they're talking about like the genre of the research paper, which if I never saw again my whole life, I would not feel that sad. And they say, so I'd like to write another one because I'm really good at it. And I think, okay, so you're really good on it. So how are you going to build on that? And sometimes I get a student, like I have a sophomore now, she is writing a scholarly essay about some of Yeats' political poetry with young scholars in writing as her kind of aspiration. And it's a big leap. There's a lot that's going to be in between the student's final draft and a submittable YSW paper, but she really wanted to be in an academic zone, but didn't have a lot of language for that. And other times I have to have some back and forths with the students to find out what they actually might like to try out. And it has nothing to do with the school research papers that they've been making. Yeah, but some of them really don't feel like, or they can't imagine doing the kind of writing they like for a grade in a class. Sometimes that's the obstacle.
It's 9:10 Eastern time. Thank you so much, Jen. I don't
Thank
know
you.
where the hour flew by, as Rebecca said. We would have loved to have you for a couple of hours, but hopefully we'll have you back. Thank you so much for your generous sharing, for your thoughtfulness. And I'm sure that, all of us learned a lot. And as I said, I feel that my thinking process will go beyond the session. The session is just the beginning, but then it will take me some time to digest everything and see connections and intersections. So thank you. I want to thank on behalf of the executive team, and please, Rebecca, Samuel, please feel free to jump in. Thank you so much, all of you, for being in attendance. This is our last meet for 2024. So
Wow,
it's
I feel
wonderful.
extra honored.
It's wonderful to be a part of this group, and we look forward to seeing you in 2025, and happy Thanksgiving. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
The last
you so
thing I'll
much.
say, along with thank you, is feel free to email me as a group or individually, or if I don't email you back until after finals, you'll understand. But I'd be happy to be in touch.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
Thank you so much for
Bye.
being with us. Good night, everybody. Thanks for attending.